The most basic way to line a shot up is to work out exactly where the cue ball needs to strike the object ball and play it there as straight as possible. But this still can go wrong. Because when I'm looking down at the shot, I can see where the cue ball needs to go. But if I want to see exactly where I'm hitting the cue ball, I need to imagine I'm seeing right through it. The more you can think about looking down the end of your cue like you're seeing down the barrel of a gun, the easier it's going to be to see where you're sending the cue ball. But even this might not come naturally. The problem is it can be very difficult to see exactly where you're aiming the cue ball. You could be thinking you're hitting it in the right direction, but when you play the shot, it doesn't quite go where you think. But don't worry, because I've come up with a plan. So this is my plan to help you improve your game in 2022. And to improve your aim, you need to practice close shots. Even at this relatively close distance, it can feel like you're aiming at the red, hoping for the best, and then magic happens, and you're never sure why you might have potted the red, or in fact why it might have missed. Practicing very simple shots like this is incredibly helpful because I can see exactly what's going to happen. I can not just see that I'm going to hit the red, I can see exactly the part of the red I'm going to push the cue ball into. It feels like I'm connected completely to the shot. After just a few attempts at these shots, you're going to get a feel for exactly where the cue ball is going to strike the object ball. As soon as you get a feel for where the cue ball is going to strike the object ball, you can just do the same thing from a little bit further away. And then back it up, and back it up, until you can look through the shot and see where the cue ball is going to strike the object ball from quite a long way away. Once you get this right, it's going to feel like you're looking directly down the line of the shot instead of observing it from above, and it'll help you with every shot. If you really want to improve your game in 2022, this is the first thing I'd look at. Because the first 5 of these steps will make a huge difference to your game if you can get them right. And the second 5 is game-changing advice for this year specifically. The next thing to look at is the stance, but it's more to do with where you're standing. This may sound a bit ridiculous, but if I stand here, I'm in the wrong place to pot the red. But I can still stretch over and pot the red. Now that still works, but the problem is my cue doesn't want to be here. It wants to be here. So if I'm stood in the wrong place, I can still push my cue through straight, but it's going to be harder to do so. It's all about getting your cue in the right position, on a dead straight line to where you're going to hit the object ball. The better position you stand in, the more your cue is going to be on line with the shot. Just like when I was stood a long way out of position and I had to stretch over the shot, if I'm stood very slightly out of position, then my cue that wants to be here hitting the ball that way has to come over here. And that means I'm not going to cue through the shot in a straight line. Because if I stand in the perfect place, that means my cue will automatically be on line with the shot without me having to do anything. And that's going to make potting the ball a lot easier. And the way to check you're standing in the right place is to practice mid-range straight pots. If you draw a line from where you want to strike the object ball straight back through the centre of the cue ball and across the floor, then you can use this as a guide to where to stand. By standing in and around the line, you'll play the shots better or worse depending on the exact position you're standing in. What you want to do is have a few goes at this until you find the perfect place to stand. The more accurately you're standing, the easier it's going to be to push your cue through the ball. Once you get your feet exactly in the right place, then it's going to make the game so much easier to play because you're going to have your cue on a perfect straight line with the shot, and that actually makes it difficult to miss. Number 3, you want to make sure you're not moving and changing your mind on the shot. What that means is you want to work out where you're going to strike the object ball before you get to the table. Then when you go to play the shot, once you get settled, you don't want to move again until you've potted the ball. It's easy to find yourself moving around on the shot if you're not certain whether or not you're going to pot the ball, but it's very difficult to see this from this position. The problem is, if you're moving around on the shot, you're not going to know exactly what you did and where you struck the ball, and you won't be able to repeat your technique, and it'll cause you problems over time. So how can you stop this? And is there a way to stay perfectly still on the shot? So how are we going to do this? Well, with a bit of inspiration from Mark Williams, and what's he doing there? He's closing his eyes on the shot. Now, I'm not for 1 second suggesting this is something you should try in a game. This is more to do with practicing. So what you do is a little bit of practice where you go to the table and instantly close your eyes once you get in the right position. This means you have to trust that you're going to pot the balls, and you can't move around on the shot because you won't be able to see where you're aiming. You only want to do about 5 to 10 minutes practice of this, and it'll make all the difference. There's no way you want to actually try this in a match though. The fourth way to help improve your game this year is to work out your hand position and where it ends up after you've played the shot. I'm talking about this hand here because where it ends up after you struck the cue ball can make a huge difference. But how can you find out? The way to practice this is to stay down on the shot until you know exactly where your hand is. So you play the shot, stay down on it, and then ask yourself the question, where is my hand? And if it's rotated this way a bit or that way, it doesn't matter what it's doing, just as long as you can get it in a consistent position. So the next time you go and play the shot, it's in exactly the same place. Step 5 is something I'm calling WUP, or warm-up phase. Quite often you find you don't get the chance to practice before playing a match. What this can mean is the first 5, maybe 10 shots you play don't go anywhere near where you want them to. And this can cause a problem if you decide then that your technique's doing something wrong and you change it. Usually this is caused because you're not quite sighting the balls right and they're not going exactly where you'd want them to. But after about 5 to 10 shots, you'll start seeing exactly where they need to go again. What you don't want to do is change anything at this time or think about it. You just want to let it happen naturally. Because if you can get through this phase without changing anything, you'll suddenly notice you're playing quite well. It's just getting through it. But that's the difficulty as snooker. You don't always get to practice. But if you do get the chance to practice beforehand, the best way to deal with this is once again, play some close range shots. Just like before, practicing shots where the cue ball's within a foot of the object ball can allow you to pick up the angles a lot faster and see exactly where the cue ball's going. The great thing about this type of shot is it's very easy to see if you're getting the connection you want with the object ball. And once you can do this, you'll start to find all the other shots suddenly become a lot easier as well. Something you will have to deal with in 2022 is lower standards, but potentially better tables. What this means is the amateur game has far less good players than it used to, but at the same time the tables you're likely to be playing on are far better, which does affect how you want to be playing the games. The fact that tables are a lot more reactive than they used to be makes it easier for all players to score bigger breaks, but the players you come up against won't necessarily be as confident. So the next 5 tips are designed specifically to help you play the game in 2022 and onwards. What this all means is playing safe more defensively. So try to avoid thick safety shots that might knock the balls on towards the pockets and instead favour thinner safety shots where you're keeping the object ball safe. And this means practicing your touch control. Practicing this will help you with the safety shots you're likely to be playing more commonly. Just roll up from the D to the blue, pink and black and see how close you can get with each of them. But before our next tip, we're just going to find Devonchi from Ranchi, India, which is there. Something else that will help this year is getting in the mindset of playing position. You never want to sacrifice the pot for position, but especially when players are under pressure, quite often they lose the cue ball because they're focusing on the pot and they haven't really thought about where they want the cue ball to finish up. And quite often this can cause you to miss the next shot and lose the frame because of it. And the way to deal with this is to think harder about where you want the cue ball to finish. This means playing the game without ever thinking about missing the pots. And I know that's incredibly difficult, but if you just focus on the positional side of the game without taking your eye off things, you'll be surprised at what happens. To start off with, if you can do that, you're going to make the game a lot easier for yourself because you're going to be in the position a lot more often. Number 8 is very important. It's getting in your own rhythm. You can lose a lot of games by playing them in the way that your opponent wants to play it. And a good way around that is to play it at your speed. This can help change the games in a big way. But for it to work, you need to know what your speed actually is. And the best way to practice this is with an open table. What this means is spreading everything in the middle of the table and trying to pop all the balls. The great thing about practicing like this is you don't need to take any of the balls out of the pockets, so you can just find your own natural speed. This is most likely to be the pace you play best at, so it's really helpful to get used to it and give this a go, so you're always playing at this speed. We're just going to quickly find Okko from Izmir, Turkey, which is there. Something else you'll need to do this year is keep everything simple. I'm definitely the sort of player who plays overly complicated positional shots and sometimes can never seem to find a simple option. I don't mean I'm deliberately playing difficult shots for fun, I just mean sometimes I can't believe how straightforward a chance is. And this is the best way to practice that. By placing the reds in this overlapping position, it means that you can only pot one red at a time, and that forces you to get the cue ball into good position. And if you don't end up in good position, then that's going to end your break. This is probably the perfect way to practice, because it forces you to play the game in the most straightforward way possible. And almost certainly, most importantly of all, number 10 is to keep everything the same for at least a month. It doesn't really matter how good your technique is. What matters is that you can repeat that technique again and again. The more you do this, the more you'll get used to playing the shots in the same way each time, and that's just going to help you play better in the future. Trust me, if you're moving around and changing your technique from shot to shot, then you're simply not going to get any better. I challenge you to keep your technique exactly the same for an entire month and watch the improvement over time. Again, not moving on the shot and keeping everything the same is the only way to keep improving. Judd Trump is a great example of this. Because Judd's technique is a little bit different to what you might expect, but because he keeps it the same every time, it works. This video explains all about it. And remember, don't just watch, play, and make the commitment to becoming a better player by subscribing to the channel and visit the website. See you later.